Pemba and James Grande.
What is going on, FA Nation? John Pemba here with James Grande. Welcome into the Fantasy Alarm NBA DFS Playbook Preview Show. We're here on Thursday night to take a look at the NBA DFS 3-game main slate over on DraftKings. Some pretty exciting matchups here on the slate. We got Minnesota, Chicago, Portland, San Antonio, Utah, Milwaukee, which means we have Anthony Edwards, we have Victor Wembanyama, we think Giannis playing today. Now we got Dame Lillard as well on the slate. Some plenty of high-priced plays, some very interesting value coming across the board tonight as well. We talk a lot about these small slates, some guys that you never thought of playing before. You're probably going to be putting into your lineups tonight if you're there to trust the rostership. So we'll be here to break that all down for all of you. If you guys have any questions, throw them into the chat. James and I are happy to get you guys set up with tonight's, NBA bets, pick'em plays, DFS lineups, you name it. We're here for you to get you all ready to go today. Jeff in the chat saying, let's do it. Love to have you in here, my guy, every day. So just like Jeff, pop in the chat, throw a question, throw a comment, and also hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that share button. Free way to support the work we do here over at the Fantasy Alarm YouTube channel. And if you're not yet a member of the Fantasy Alarm family, we got that 7-day free trial still going on right now. So make sure you go check that on as well, fantasyalarm.com/win. When you sign up, use promo code Let's Go. You get 7 days free to kick off your subscription. James, 3 games. How are we feeling, man?
Feeling pretty good. I need to check you on something here, John. You said my guy. It's literally some guy. True. It says right in his name, Jeff P. Some guy, not my guy. So you're off to a slow start. It's all good. I'll pick you up here. That's what we do. We've been on the show for a while. When one of us is down, the other one picks each other up, and you're off to a bad start. So I'm here for you and for Jeff, some guy. But yeah, it's a fun 3-game slate because I like these slates when you just see a random couple names pop up on the value. Obviously, one of them I think was expected when Milwaukee announced their starting lineup. The other one, not so much, but we'll talk about it. And I like, that like the choice because you could play these value plays and jam stars in, or you can look at it from through the lens of like can get 1 star tonight and might go fair and balanced the rest of my lineup. So I think these slates are pretty fun overall. Still have really good contests everywhere, despite it being Thursday Night Football that they're butting heads with. But I'm ready to get into it. It's a fun little 3-gamer with lots of star power, lots of letters too. I mean, obviously Antetokounmpo, Wembanyama, top the list, lots of letters there.
Dosunmu, not long name, but also just a bunch of random letters jammed together to form a name there. So we go position by position. We'll break it all down for you. Again, your top overall price guys, 2 guys up over 10K, and Giannis and Wemby here. At the point guard position, Lillard is your top priced guard, $9,500. Obviously, we know Giannis in those 2 games. Last 2 games rather. Last game without Giannis, but the last 2 games against Cleveland, he has been dominating. 41 and 36 actual points in those 2 games, 66 and 47 fantasy points. He had that game against Boston where he went for 33 as well for 58. So we're getting some pretty big ceiling games out of Lillard in losses because they only have 1 win on the year. We are expecting Giannis back tonight. They're home. They have a good matchup against Utah. But on a slate where you have to really decide where you're looking to spend, Lillard maybe fits more of a fair and balanced bill than a big stars and scrubs bill tonight, I think, from where the ownership's looking like.
Yeah, and I think on small slates, ownership is incredibly important because, you get Coach Chris sliding in the chat here. I haven't seen him in a while. A couple comments here and there, but happy to have you back, Chris. I think Lillard is always an intriguing GPP pivot off of Giannis. We've talked about that a bunch. He's been really good outside of a game this year, maybe 2. So it's an elite spot. These are 2 bottom 10 defenses. These are 2 teams that are top 8 in pace overall. And, Utah is healthy, could keep it competitive. I mean, it's not like Milwaukee has they've lost to bad teams too, not just good teams. So I am definitely intrigued by Lillard as a pivot from Giannis. Like, we're under the assumption Giannis is playing until we hear he's not. So you can look at it from the perspective of he's significantly lower owned than Giannis. And if Giannis is out, well, he's going to be one of the three highest rostered players of the slate. So and you're jamming him into your lineup. So I think Dame looks good all around in tournaments, or if Giannis is ruled out as like the chalky spend up. So perfectly fine getting
after that, it's obviously a price drop. $2,000 goes down to Anthony Simons. You have Josh Giddey, Kobe White, Chris Paul, Keontae George, sort of your next five. We're not expecting to see Zach LaVine. He's considered doubtful during their midday injury report. Ruled out yesterday. I don't know if this ends up being like, hey, out, upgraded to doubtful, then maybe like we get a questionable and then we get him back, because he did go through shoot around yesterday and we all thought like he was returning, and then he was out right around roster lock. So we'll probably have to wait and see. All of these games lock at 8 o'clock though. So if we get an 8:01 Zach LaVine's in, lineups are locked and everybody's pissed, right? So hopefully we'll get that information around 7:30. But talk to me about sort of how you would approach these Bulls guards in this matchup against Minnesota, or if you prefer a Keontae George, a Chris Paul, and Anthony Simons to them.
I mean, I think they're interesting because, like, current ownership, we're going to get to the value play that's really popular in Chicago. I guess two occupy the top 5 spots. Neither of them are either Kobe White or Josh Giddey, right? Neither of them are Nikola Vucevic either. So I think Kobe White is really interesting in tournaments. Recency bias. Yesterday, he stunk. The Bulls got blown out. He only played 29 minutes. The game prior, Kobe White went nuclear in 34 minutes. And, I understand typically it's like, this isn't a great spot. Minnesota, better than average defense. Not as good as last year, might I add. They're 12th in defensive rating. Last year, their MO was defense, right? So I am intrigued by Kobe White, especially at the ownership. I'm intrigued by Josh Giddey because Josh Giddey's been pretty bad without LaVine this year. When you look at the on-off splits, he's been better with LaVine. But at the end of the day, he has a massive ceiling. And when shots are falling and he's, stuffing the stat sheet like we know he can, he is a 50 fantasy point ceiling guy. We haven't seen it the last couple of games. The minutes have still been fine, 28 and 30 in those 2 games. Just hasn't really grabbed the rebounds that we've seen and grown accustomed to. He's also a double-digit assist threat. So, I'm good with Giddey and Kobe White. I lean Kobe White, just the usage rate. He has the highest usage rate on the team without LaVine. So I lean Kobe White. Understand if you want to go Giddey. They're both like pretty low owned. So if you want to look at it from that perspective, they're going to be lower owned than Keontae George. They're obviously going to be lower owned than Ayo Dosunmu, who's going to be super popular tonight. And that's not really a surprise considering what we've seen from Ayo in the last few slates. But I think the Bulls are great leverage. Chris Paul, surprisingly, getting a bunch of ownership tonight. Like, I like Chris Paul in this spot, but back to back, and Chicago is lower owned with like higher usage players. So I think the Bulls guys are very interesting pivots off of Chris Paul. And
I think with George, a lot of people are obviously just understanding that yesterday, front leg of the back-to-back in the blowout, they just sat him, and they're like, you know what, better chance of being a more competitive game against Portland where we can get a win. Like, why push him in what was pretty much a 20-point deficit that entire game? And they subbed him in. I think it was like in the second quarter, in the back end, and they subbed him out like 2 minutes later. They're like, you know what, never mind. And he started the third, and they subbed him out like 4 minutes into that one, and that was it. He never saw the floor again. So, they got some of their young guys some exposure to that game. And I think that's why people are going back to him against Portland. Now the price is more than we've used to paying him, $1,000 up from the last time out. But 3 straight games of 40 fantasy points for that. I think I saw he's averaging 17 assist chances per game this year, which is like obviously a ridiculous number. for a guy that pretty much would lock you in on a double-double, especially if you could get those Mike Conley assist conversion rates, with the 75% conversion rate on assist opportunities, he would have like 15 assists tonight. Yeah. So, I think Chris Paul is appealing for that sense because, again, it's a smaller slate and you're looking at a guy that could go for 40 at under 7K and people are kind of getting to him. There are obviously some other options, especially in the value tier. Calvin wants to know our thoughts on Delano Banton. And then Albert talking about Andre Jackson moving into the starting lineup tonight. Point guard, small forward eligibility for Jackson. So the goated eligibility here, you can basically play him at any position, but center on DraftKings. 25 minutes yesterday or a couple of games ago, 7.7 rebounds. We've seen Jackson in starting lineups and playing big minutes before. He is not like the greatest fantasy point per minute guy, and especially if Giannis is back, how much do we actually, expect to see out of him in this game? But the minutes at least feel a bit more secure. They're going with him over Gary Trent. Maybe they want more offensive punch on their second unit with Trent, and Trent could still end up playing 30 minutes, but playing off the bench first. So, it'd be interesting to see, but talk to me on Jackson here. And then, obviously Banton, in 12 minutes, he's gone for 27 and 22. In 9 minutes, he went for 16. So, like, you're getting 5, 6, 7x, 8x, 9x, in less than 15 minutes here. Definitely, I think, a bit interesting. Knowing that the floor is on this guy and knowing he may not play like more than 10 minutes. What are your thoughts here?
Okay. All right, let's start with Jackson because he's the most popular. He's the second most popular play of the slate. They need defense. It's just right. They have to put someone who can stop somebody on the floor. He's their best option. So I agree with their decision. He may not stop anybody, but he is their best option to do that. I am perfectly fine getting there, but as you said, there is a low floor, and if they need offense, there's no guarantee Andre Jackson's on the floor later in the game. Now, if they need offense, could he stay on the floor? They take Prince off. Prince barely played last game, and they go to Gary Trent? Sure, but obviously, you have to like the fact that Andre Jackson's starting because he's cheap value starting. We're going to get to again, keep teasing this other value play we'll get to. He's not going to start. And people are getting to him more than they're getting to Jackson with better eligibility, in a better spot, and is confirmed the starter, right? That's so I'm perfectly fine going to Andre Jackson. Just understand that he has a low floor.
Yeah.
The Delano Banton thing, John. If I asked you in the last 3 games combined, right?
Yes.
He's played 33 minutes. How many of those minutes has he played in the first half?
None.
Take a random guess. Okay. How many of those minutes has he played in the first 3 quarters?
My assumption is none, if I had to guess. He has closed and played the final 12 minutes of each of the last 2 games, and he played 9 minutes in the OKC game, all in the fourth quarter. He has not played a singular minute prior to the fourth quarter. Now, do they view him as Mariano Rivera? Do they call on the righty when they need a closer? Because they won that Pelicans game. Delano Banton had 20 fourth quarter points. Are they literally using him as a closer? Right? I mean, it is a legit. I mean, they lost by 6 and won by 18 in 2 games that he finished the entire 12-minute fourth quarter. He played with the starters in that game against the Pelicans in the fourth quarter. Obviously, Toumani Camara played. Denny did not. They sat Denny that whole corner, so Denny was the one that lost out in that rotation. DeAndre Ayton obviously played minutes. Anthony Simons, Jeremy Grant, all on the floor there. Scoot played more than half of the fourth quarter there. Is that a trend? Did he play for Denny in both games there? Let's see here. Nope. Denny played. Who didn't play? Yeah.
They went Denny and Ayton.
Yeah, Scoot didn't play in that first game. He played 12 minutes against Phoenix. So he played over Scoot and then he played over Denny in the last 2 games in the fourth quarter.
But the final point was the one that Doug just brought back. There's not a chance that like people lose minutes. And now there is nothing confirmed that Sharp is back, but he is listed questionable for the first time this year. That obviously the trend is to him playing. If he doesn't play, Banton does have a better chance at least of seeing the floor. But if he plays, like there's just no guarantee whatsoever that we see Delano Banton at all. And you're banking on one quarter. He's been great in that quarter. But again, you're banking on him continuing to shoot 70+% from the floor. I'm not going to be chasing that. So I don't have much interest in Delano
I agree.
Banton.
I don't have any either. I'm just saying
like
that's where the the questions are being asked, right? I agree with Doug here. Shaedon Sharp being back, he can play the same positions that Banton would play. Banton would play in a blowout, right? Like he'd be in the game if the game is being blown out, but that's about it. Yes. So on a 3-game slate, if you don't mind the risk, and that could be there with a guy that may not see the floor. There's that. Anthony wants to know, is Markkanen and Giannis in? We don't have official word yet. Markkanen did go through full shoot around though, so we are at least and upgraded to so we do have at least an expectation that Lauri Markkanen is going to be in here today, along with Jordan Clarkson as well. And then Giannis is still questionable with the thigh. So, we'll see. But our expectations are that they'll be in. And again, with all 3 of these games locking at 8:00, our hope, of course, is that we'll get the injury news by no later than 7:30, and we can comfortably set our lineups in there. The Prince, you didn't miss too much. We basically said don't play Delano Banton. And, we really like this mid-tier range. Chris Paul is getting a lot of love. Keontae George, we like the minutes, and a good matchup against Milwaukee here. Ayo's getting some chalk with the expectation that there's no Zach LaVine tonight, so it can go in those directions. Shooting guard, again, smaller.
Hold on. I want to ask you a question about Mike Conley's getting the 4th highest rostership tonight, and I talk to you about this all the time because, like, for me, I would, in almost every scenario possible, I would just play the lower owned Dante DiVincenzo. Like 10 out of 10 times. Knowing that Mike Conley caps out at 26 minutes, basically. Right? DiVincenzo's last 2 games played 28 minutes, had played 32 in the opener. So I'm personally not chasing that. I understand he had a good game. He's had some, and by some I mean like 2, 3, like 5x plus outings. But he's the 4th highest rostered player tonight. People are searching for value, and I don't think I'd go to the Mike Conley.
I have some shares of Conley tonight, just getting the exposure to him because of the rostership that he is on tonight's slate. Plus, even in his bad games, right? San Antonio, he played 21 minutes. He took 4 total shots, 18.75 fantasy points. It's a smaller slate, right? Like if you get 20 fantasy points out of a cheap value guy and it allowed you to get up to a Giannis Wemby stack or a Anthony Edwards, Dame Lillard, some combo of the 4, you're saving some money and it feels like he has, a 20-point floor in that range. Now, that's still not 5x at his current price tag, right? That's 23 fantasy points is 5x. He's only giving you that 3 times. But I think on a smaller slate, we talk about this. You kind of accept 4.5, if it lets you get the double spend ups like you're going. Calvin wants to know, is NEW a pivot off of Andre Jackson? So again, NEW is cheap. It's $3,900, a little bit more expensive than Andre Jackson. He's going to come off the bench. They could very well play the same amount of minutes. What are your thoughts here as a pivot play?
NEW is always interesting when they face like these 3-guard teams. Like the Bulls are going to run White, Dosunmu, Josh Giddey. That that bodes well for NEW. There's always the case that Jaden McDaniels gets in foul trouble. Anytime Jaden McDaniels is in foul trouble, NEW is always the guy that gets the biggest boost because they like having one of those guys on the floor because how good they are at defending the opposing team's best player. So If you think McDaniels gets in foul trouble, there's a bump. If you think that they ride NAW a little bit more because the 3-guard lineup the Bulls will run a lot tonight, I also think that that's an interesting pivot as well. So, I think NAW does have a mid-20s to high 20s ceiling tonight for in terms of minutes. He's not like the best fantasy point per minute player, but he is good peripherally. So I'd be perfectly fine pivoting to NAW. And obviously a dream scenario for Minnesota's in the best spot on the board. The Bulls are number 1 in pace. Minnesota's 22nd. Bulls are worse than league average defensively. Like, I am pro anything you can get Minnesota tonight.
Yeah.
Feel good
Anthony wants
about
to know
Minnesota.
Sexton or Divincenzo. There is obviously a pretty big salary gap, and that's the same thing on FanDuel as well. I looked it up. FanDuel, Divincenzo is 53, Sexton is 64. So almost a comparable difference in salary between the two sites. So Anthony, really, it really depends on like where your lineup builds are going. If you need the money, Divincenzo's fine. We have talked like the last time that Jordan Clarkson played, he started, and Sexton came off the bench.
Yep.
Seems like Sexton's probably safe for 25 minutes ish when everybody's good to go on the floor. He played the 34 because there's no Marketing, there was no Clarkson, and it was a competitive game. So, I don't think we're going to get over 30 minutes again. If he starts though, and maybe Clarkson is a bit limited with the foot, maybe there's some more minutes for Sexton here. Sexton's also a guy that in 25 minutes can score 30 actual, right? 25, 30 actual. So depends on what your lineup build looks like. I think we're going Divincenzo to help you kind of spend up at the top tier. But if you want to be a little different tonight and go Colin Sexton, like that also works.
I think Sexton's just hard to get to if he's not starting.
I think on a smaller slate, that's sort of where leverage can come into play a little bit because people have that similar mindset of like, man, $6,200 for a guy that may play 22 minutes tonight. That's kind of tough to get around. Especially I think, given the range, you've been talking all the time, like for $200 more, Keontae Jarvis is literally playing the minutes. Like there's no issues here. So
right.
You got that going for you. Shooting guard has Anthony Edwards at 93. Again, Anthony Simons there. A lot of these guys have dual positional eligibility. How are you breaking down the shooting guard tier?
Yeah, I like Ant. Obviously, it's been a little bit of a slow start in terms of fantasy production. He does not lead them in fantasy points per minute. I sent that to you earlier today. He's been good. Wasn't necessarily needed in the Charlotte game, the Spurs game. They got Wemby, and that's all good. That happens. You move on. 9,300 is the most expensive he's been all year. So it's definitely a decision to make. I obviously am pro Minnesota tonight. He plays massive minutes. I mean, he has in any game that wasn't a blowout, he's played 36 plus minutes, right? Including 41 on opening night. It just goes to show you what the minute ceiling is. So I'm perfectly fine with Ant. I like Simons in tournaments. Like everyone else on Portland, nobody's making shots. Like if we know Ant Simons is a bucket, he's shooting 38% from the floor. That is going to over time correct itself. He's already 3 times or 4 times this year scored 24 points. In 2 of them, he's gone for 40 plus, and in a couple other, he's gone nearly 40. So he still has a higher ceiling than that. Simons in tournaments is interesting. We talked Kobe White. I really like him. I'm the same kind. I'm pretty good getting to Jordan Clarkson here. A little worried, obviously, because this injury was projected to be worse. They said like he's kind of like coming back really fast from it, but he logged the full practice yesterday and was upgraded to probable. So obviously they feel fine. If he's starting 5,400, I really like it. If he's coming off the bench, why wouldn't we expect him to play mid-20s minutes like he's been playing this year, right? So 5,400 for Jordan Clarkson is really interesting because the whole field is going to go to Ayo Dosunmu at 53. I think that's perfectly fine. We saw 2 games ago what Ayo Dosunmu, when extended, looks like, and when he's not going 2 for 13. And 2 for 13 doesn't bother me. He took 13 shots in 25 minutes. It's a great number. So I like this next range, Clarkson to Sunmu. I would like Tumani Kamara more if there was no Shaden Sharp. I think not that Shaden Sharp's going to play a lot, but obviously Kamara could take a little dip. I don't think he will because he's their best, defender. And we've seen they'll play Kamara over Denny, who was getting the most talk from Chauncey Billups this preseason. So like Kamara, I think Champagne's interesting. DiVincenzo, I think there's a lot of very interesting.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Again, you're looking at tiers of guys that are going to be playing minutes. Everybody's playing Io, as you said, but Tumani Kamara is a guy that is playing a good amount of minutes. I don't know. I don't think he's going to be one that would get cut by Shaden Sharp being activated here. Champagne's going to be playing a lot of minutes, as you said. Castle started, yesterday. We'll see if that continues, 44, and then we get down to some more dart throws down here. It's a tier where I think a lot of people are going to be using for fillers because, again, we're getting into where the expensive plays of the slate are, right? And you got to find a way to jam those guys in. Anthony's saying he's looking to play Collins and Kessler while play Lillard. If that's the case, then you're trying to play DiVincenzo probably then to save some money if that's the way you're going. Yep. Does Portis' success depend on Giannis' status? Yep. He started. He's good at the price.
At the price.
He can certainly come off the bench and have a big game against Chicago for sure. But he did what he did because Giannis was out that last game.
Against Utah, but same point, same bad team. Just interesting note on Stefan Castle is not only did he start, and I was looking at some rotational stuff earlier, he played 17 first half minutes. They closed with basically him over Harrison Barnes, and they used Keldon off the bench. So it was, Chris Paul, Wembanyama, Castle, Chris Paul, and Keldon, Castle, Wemby, basically Champagnie, Paul, Keldon. Champagnie checked out with 2 minutes to go, and they those are the first 2 minutes Harrison Barnes played. If Castle has a chance at closing the half and playing that's you're pacing for 30 minutes, first round pick, lottery pick. So, Stefan Castle, was he great? No, he wasn't. But there's not a lot of value, and there's people that are going to guys that are really just unknown from fantasy point perspective because we're almost there to the next guy. Andre Jackson may start, but we don't have a true expectation unless Doc Rivers came out pregame and told us what the minutes are going to be. So if Castle has a chance at 30 minutes again, shooting guard, small forward,
and the way that rotation worked for Castle, he played 16 straight minutes there, finishing the second, playing most of the third quarter there. Then everybody got pulled, and the bench crew basically finished the game. Castle never saw the floor again after he got subbed out in the third quarter. Going on over to small forward, Laurie expecting to be back. Do we think there's going to be any limitations here? He was another guy that was playing at least 30, while everybody else is sort of in that limbo rotation. Do you think he's just good to go right off the bat?
Yeah, unless we hear differently, I'd assume so. He's missed a week, so who knows? It's a back. He missed a week. He full practiced yesterday. He looked really good the opener and then just kind of mediocre, but the rebounds were there. That's something that you and I have always talked about, that if the rebounds are there, we'll usually know if we're going to have a big game because the scoring's typically there. At least we know the shot volume's there. The minutes have been there. He's one of two players on Utah we can truly trust when it comes to getting 30 plus minutes. So I'd be good with him in a tournament. Look, Milwaukee doesn't have defense, dude. They cannot defend anybody. So if they come out and tell us that Lauri Markkanen is not limited in any capacity, he will be super low owned, and you will get a 25-point scorer on a 3-game slate for possibly single-digit ownership or in the teens, right? And that's how on 3-game slates you differentiate. So if there's no limitations on Markkanen, yes, I have interest because Milwaukee with or without Giannis has not played
Yep,
good
I agree with you. I mean,
basketball.
I would say, it is at least a little nerve-wracking that his defensive matchup likely would be Giannis or Brook Lopez would be out there on the perimeter, like challenging him on shots. Again, I understand how bad their defense has been. Those are at least the tougher defensive players on that team. So, and at $7,900, he's just a super tournament play. For me, again, we're expecting Levine to be out. Denny didn't play the entire fourth quarter, played 21 minutes. I was high on Denny at the beginning of the year. I thought he'd have some good opportunities on a bad team. Like everybody on that team, as you said, though, he's not making shots. He's been giving you good everything else, like steals and rebounds have been fine, and blocks have been fine. Rebounds have been good. Just not scoring enough. You got Keldon. It could be pretty interesting on this slate. Again, a guy that's just getting minutes, and on smaller slates, minutes are king. Same thing with Champagny. Do we want to just jump down to our guy here? Dalen Terry is getting the high, at least for now, currently projected the highest roster player on the slate. I think there's two possible reasons for this. First, obviously, being Levine not playing.
Correct.
Second, being blowout. I think that there's a chance that he gets blowout run. Guys come off the floor. Dalen Terry comes on the floor. Again, he's already sort of in their rotation, playing some minutes anyways, but he got the 24 minutes because, the way that game ended up last night. But 3,200 people are just biting into that. 24 minutes, no Levine, spread. Like they think Terry has a chance tonight at $3,200.
I get it because there's not a lot of value. But let's talk this through, okay? Was in the rotation last night. He was the first sub off the bench, him and Bazulis, which I think is also intriguing. He played a 6-minute, 30-second stint in the first quarter. He then closed the second quarter, right? Do you know why he closed the second quarter? You're looking at it, so you can answer it. Ayo Dosunmu picked up his third foul with 7:50 to go in the second quarter. And Dalen Terry then proceeded to play two shifts. They dusted off Torrey Craig for 2:54. As soon as Dalen Terry was good to go, he checked back in the game, right? So, obviously he subbed in the game in the first quarter, and that was a real rotation. But what would, that second quarter rotation of 325 turned into 625 because there was foul trouble. So Dalen Terry realistically would have played 10 first half minutes or so, right? He then didn't actually close the game in blowout. He checked out at the 3:30 mark. And
that's a good turn, right? Because you want him finishing that game there.
For sure.
Instead, they gave those minutes to Talon Horton-Tucker, who is another guy that you could potentially pivot to today. He too got first quarter run, and then he barely played the rest of the game. He got 2 minutes at the end of the second. He got about a 3-minute run there between the third and the fourth quarter. Then he wasn't back in, and then they subbed him back in 8 minutes to go in the fourth, and he literally played the final 8 minutes of the game in garbage time. So
I'm a little less bullish on THT tonight because he's now $4,000. That would be, I would literally more likely go to Matas Bazulis tonight because there's a lot of factors, but he also checked in the first quarter. Did he play in the second quarter? No, he did not. But he had a big shift in the third. And if you want to talk about blowout, he is going to play in the blowout. That is one thing we know for certain. Bazulis is going to play in the blowout. He did last night. So, if you want to pivot off Dalen Terry, if you're scared to play Dalen Terry, I think Bazulis is the guy. He hasn't given us any reason to, believe that he'll get anywhere close to 20 minutes, other than if you think that this game turns
and nobody's playing him. He's 2% right now.
And nobody's playing him. So, that is clearly your pivot. If you just, one, believe in the talent, two, believe this game that's now, I think, 9.5. It's a 9.5.
Chicago on a back-to-back, traveling road to home against a rested Minnesota team. There's a lot of things that we think this game could end up. Why are we calling this a blowout? Because last night? Nah, man, we're just talking point spreads. They're 9.5 point. Just talking spreads.
Just talking spreads, and we're also just giving you the outlook on what a possible
they're
scenario
9.5
on the
point
rotation.
underdogs at home on the second night of a back-to-back. That's most likely why they're suggesting that the game could be a blowout. So understanding where you're coming from, sure, that's fine. We're literally just talking point spread. 10 point.
No. Yeah, we never had one said it was a blowout. Never once. Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, and also we're just talking about a 50% Dalen Terry who is not guaranteed 23 minutes. So, I think that like he plays a full extra shift in that second quarter because of foul trouble. And maybe we don't even see him at all or for even a smaller shift in the second quarter if Io is not in foul trouble there. So I appreciate we appreciate the comments, but don't come in here talking about what's fish and what's not if you're not listening to contextually what we're talking
9.5 point underdogs at home is usually not a good sign. So we got small forward, and that's where the ownership is, at least right now. Jackson and Terry are getting about 50% of the ownership that we're looking at here. So yeah, I will not be playing 50% Terry. I agree with you. The 50% roster Terry is where you're going. You want to be different on tonight's slate. Go by all means. That guy could go out there and score 8 fantasy points tonight, and you're perfectly good, with him there. So power forward. We got Giannis up here at 11-1. We are assuming he plays. There's no indication he's not gonna until we get the official announcement that he won't. So we'll act as if he is. He has been dominant in his recent games, obviously 71-61. Last 2 against Cleveland and Memphis. Cleveland we consider to be one of the best defensive teams, especially in terms of front court presence, dealing with Evan Mobley and Jared Allen. It did not matter in that game, 34-16-9. Now you're looking at Utah. They got Walker Kessler, Lauri Markkanen, John Collins as like their front court rotation. I don't see that being a reason that Giannis wouldn't kind of go off here. In Milwaukee's defense being bad enough that, we've seen teams they're 1-6. We think that they should be a better team. Worst teams are hanging around with them. So if you get a full run out of Giannis here tonight, we should be looking at sort of similar production. I want to know your thoughts on Julius Randle, though, because I've watched a couple of shows today. People aren't really getting into him. They don't feel like maybe the juice is worth the squeeze with the price point, with the way some of these roster constructions are going. What are your thoughts on Randle at 82?
I think it's the price for sure, because he hasn't necessarily given us a ceiling. I'm not saying he can't, but there hasn't been a ceiling with Julius Randle yet. This is obviously a spot to do so. The minutes are there. The volume is there. The rebounds are a little down playing next to the center that he's playing next to. The assists are what they are. He's a good passer, 5 assists. So I'm good with Julius Randle because this is such an elite spot. Again, Chicago is the number 1 pace team in the NBA by 2 full possessions. Minnesota's 22nd. Like, this is an insane advantage for Minnesota. So I really don't have a negative thing to say about them in general. It's just simply a price point thing where you are just waiting to see what his ceiling can be in this new spot that he's in. We're still seeing it from like Nas Reed, where Nas Reed's broken 2 slates and we know what Ant's going to do. And, Divincenzo is a high usage player off the bench. So like there's still a lot going. Rudy Gobert's, whatever you believe in Rudy Gobert, he's a great rebounder. So like
I've thrown him in some lineups because he has like that 50 fantasy point ceiling, like when all things go off. Yes. Obviously playing with Anthony Edwards does certainly make it a little bit more difficult to deal with, the available usage rate, for that offense here. But like you said, he can pass the ball well. The rebounds will be there. He can score. And playing the 20 max tonight, get some exposure to a bunch of guys that have a higher ceiling. So I certainly don't mind how it goes there. Coach Chris saying he can't play the Wolves yet, except for Divincenzo.
He's crossed off 2 of 6 teams off the slate. Chris said he's not playing the Spurs and he's not playing the T-Wolves. So
and Rolly's saying Anthony Edwards not being aggressive yet. He's shooting a lot of threes, but we do want to see more shots out of him here.
A lot of threes.
So you got Randle again. We got Lauri Markkanen, who we talked about. Bobby Poe we know his role is off the bench. He started in place of Giannis, and he popped off. Again, a tough spot against Cleveland. He had no problem against it. 21 and 18 with 3 blocks. This would be a great spot for Bobby Portis. He would immediately be the highest rostered player on the slate. If Giannis got ruled out, he would be 90% rostered on a 3-game slate. And you have to play them. That's definition of good chalk. So it's where I think we go. Coach Chris wants to talk Pat Williams. $4,800.
I don't.
Mid-20s in minutes.
I don't.
The minutes wise, he's going to be there. Defensively, they considered him to be pretty good. His matchup would be, Randall, McDaniels in this spot here. What are we thinking?
I mean, he starts. He's a value play. Shots to go around without Levine, but we've seen, since this shoulder injury pop up, he has a shorter leash. They are willing to sub him out early. And even with Levine out, he's still 4th, maybe even 5th in their in their shot chart, right? He's just a very low usage player. I don't hate it. He's not going to get blowout run, which isn't necessarily the greatest either.
So we did just get an ownership update. We say this all the time. The early ownership on some of these guys, sometimes a bit higher. When we get closer to the slate, they come down a little bit more. Terry and Jackson, not 50% anymore, sitting around 35, 36%. So better, right? Certainly better. The top guys haven't really changed. No real major movers from what I'm seeing in terms of earlier today when we got that update, we saw Dalen Terry up there. Like, what is going on? That is surprising. Right. But at least I feel better knowing that we're not forced to jam in 50% Dalen Terry into our
and Andre Jackson in one lineup. Oh, what a freaking night!
People still will though. Listen, people are going to go to the value on this slate still, and these are large field tournament ownerships. If you're in a single entry, you boost those numbers up. You'll probably have higher ownership in those spots here. What is Patrick Williams for our rostership here tonight? Pat Will
9. He's at 9.
Actually, again, I have to update our sheet to get it up on the site. Up to 18 now for Patrick Williams. So let me get that updated so we can look at it. And
he's lineup filler. He's lineup filler. If he has a good game, you could see him play 34, 35 minutes. He's only done it once, but he's fine.
Yeah, but again, roster lock at 8 p.m. tonight, everybody. So there's still gonna be more updates coming throughout the evening on ownership and things like that. So if you are a member of the Fantasy Alarm family, you get in our Discord, you get access to our ownership. We'll certainly be updating these, as we get closer to roster lock. But like I said, we had that midday update where all of a sudden Dalen Terry sitting there at 50%. We're like, that's kind of gross. Now we're down a little bit more reasonably. A bunch of guys in that 30% range. Terry and Jackson still your highest rostered 3K plays. So, you do have to at least still consider that about 35% of the field are getting to them. But, and even higher probably in single entries, but definitely feel, a little bit better. And who knows, maybe in another hour, those bump back up and we'll see where we're at once we get some official news here. So we talked already, Portis, Markkanen, that whole crew, Jeremy Grant, John Collins to me is still super interesting, even coming off the bench. If Markkanen is at all limited, there could be some more minutes for John Collins here. If there's any foul trouble for Kessler in this matchup because, Giannis is dunking on him or something like that, there's more minutes for John Collins. And he's been a very good fantasy point per minute play this week, this season. And he's $6,500 is a really fair price tag.
Yeah, it just literally comes down to what's Will Hardy thinking on that day, right? There's always a chance he may one day come back to start at power forward. Now that they're dusting off Drew Eubanks and Drew Eubanks is backing up center, why wouldn't Collins be your starting power forward in that scenario? I get it, development, Cody Williams, cool. But it's 7 games in, you have plenty of time to develop Cody Williams if you want. So if John Collins is starting, I have absolutely no issues other than potential to get in foul trouble. That's anyone can potentially get in foul trouble from time to time. So if John Collins is going to go out and give me 28, 13, 5 and be in foul trouble, I'll be okay with 28, 13, 5. So in tournaments, I'm very intrigued. I would love to see his name in the starting lineup.
Do you think who would they start him over? Do you think they would put Markkanen on the bench to begin the game?
No, I think that they would do their what they were doing last year with Markkanen at the 3. Yeah.
Okay.
But that's obviously just, I mean, they've done it for a couple of years. Cleveland started it with Markkanen. And when he was originally went to Utah, like they started doing it too. So they can play Markkanen at either forward spot and play Collins at the 4. It just depends on what they're going to do.
Agreed. Depends. Final update probably around 7:30, 7:45. Once we usually get the 7:30 lineup updates on an 8 o'clock lock tonight, so be on the lookout for that. I'll be getting those updated for you guys. And yeah, Brandon, we end every show building a lineup, so no worries here. We'll get a lineup for you guys. Yeah, we know Markkanen's probable. Anthony there that came through earlier today, and then we do like Chris Paul tonight at the point guard. A lot of people like him at the point guard there. So. All right, any other power forwards that we're looking at? Nas Reed has that dual positional eligibility. Keldon, the dual positional eligibility. Thoughts on either player here?
Yeah, I mean, not a lot of ownership on Nas Reed. And I think it's kind of like Julius Randle, where Julius Randle's ownership is pretty high. Nas Reed has half the ownership of Julius Randle, and obviously, like,
yeah, that last update, more people were definitely more putting into the Randle bucket there. Honestly, with Terry and Jackson taking the ownership drop that they did, almost makes me feel like we might be getting the 1-star fair and balanced build a little bit.
Yes, I agree. And I think that's, we talked about at the top of the show, like people are just going to have to make a decision on what they're going to do tonight, whether they want to jam like Ant and Giannis or Wemby and Giannis, like whatever the case is. But I think Nas Reed, as you see on the screen, like has a insane ceiling. When his shot is falling, he is very hard to stop. He has 2 40 burgers off the bench. And I messaged it to you today. He is literally the highest fantasy point per minute producer on Minnesota this year. So higher than Ant, higher than Randall, higher than anyone on their team. Nas Reed leads the team in fantasy points per minute. So I like Nas at 56.
Sure.
Harrison Barnes was getting a lot of ownership earlier today. Thank God he's not anymore. No interest there. But there's nothing else at power forward that is like worth even mentioning.
Sure. Going on over to the center position. Wemby is there, 10-5. Get Vucevic, $8,500. He obviously dips down. Wemby and Giannis can be among the top 2 guys for spending up. So if you can fit them, you can. I definitely like the way we've been using Vucevic of late, but he's got to deal with Gobert in this matchup here. Obviously, Ayton's doing with Wemby. So it's not like the greatest center matchups for most here on the board. Obviously, Wemby on the other side of that Ayton spot looking good, as is Giannis with the dual positional eligibility.
Cantelier, Dalen Terry currently projected as the second highest rostered player of the slate. So, everyone's data is different, but that's what we see on our end. We'll see. We'll see what the ownership ends up. It's 8 o'clock lock because a lot to go. Wembanyama is great if you can get to Wemby if you want to save some salary. Has a very high ceiling, as we've seen. I mean, he has 10 block upside. He has 10 plus blocks and steal upside. And I'm not really worried about the back-to-back. Last week, it was the first game for their interim head coach. They played him 34 minutes on the second leg. So definitely okay getting to Wemby. Like, I prefer Giannis for $600 more. I think that price.
We had the comment rather from Anthony earlier. Worried about the minutes for Wemby. He's not playing only 30. He played 34 in 2 of the last 4 games. He got limited last night due to the blowout. Now, it is the second leg of a back-to-back. They do try to sometimes be cautious with Wembanyama, obviously. So, sure, maybe he gets to 30, but we've also seen him play 30 minutes and go for 60 fantasy points, and we know what the ceiling is. We've seen it in 2 of the last 4. So, like James says, if you can find the extra money to get Giannis, it feels a bit safer, obviously, given everything. But people are picking and choosing. They're
Yep.
one or the other tonight for how their lineups are going.
Yeah, their ownership is basically identical. And it is probably just a case of like I can save $600 for a similar ceiling because Wemby is a freak and Giannis is a freak, and they can do no wrong sometimes with the basketball court. So
Yeah.
I like both. I think Vooch is very intriguing. I don't obviously like the spot. Rudy Gobert is very good defensively. Obviously, like say what you want, you don't just accidentally win 4 defensive player of the years.
Right.
Like that's not just like how that works. So it's not an easy spot. Dude, he's averaging 1.5 fantasy points per minute without Levine this year. It's a small sample, obviously, like, 70 minutes, but 1.5 fantasy points per minute is massive number.
Yeah.
If you can keep this game, like if this game stays competitive and you get full run out of him, we've seen it. I mean, he just in the Utah game without Levine, he goes for 50 and he's gone for basically 40 plus in every game
He's
been
been really
extended.
good against good teams anyway. I mean, Brooklyn, I know Claxton hasn't been playing at full capacity, but had 53 fantasy points there, going 10 of 11. Orlando, we know how good defensively they are. 36 minutes in that game, 46 fantasy points there. Again, Gobert's a different level defender, defensive player of the year, and all that stuff. But Vucevic ability to stretch the floor, the rebounding has been great. At $8,500, there aren't many obvious center options tonight. So, I think that's probably why you're seeing Giannis and Wemby is highly owned as well, just because like they're being plugged into the center spot and you're filling out with power forward and the other forward positions with some of the value that we've talked about. So, again, I'm fine really playing any of these ones if you want to get there. No arguments really. Maybe not Ayton. I don't know. Like, what are your thoughts on that spot?
I called him Deandre Safeton to you yesterday,
Yeah.
and I don't feel any different.
Okay.
I don't think like he's a priority, but I wouldn't fault you if you wanted to plug 30 to 40 fantasy points in your lineup, right? That's kind of what DeAndre Ayton's giving you every night. So if you're just looking for someone who's safe, I mean, he's taking double-digit shots. He has a double-double in every game but one this year.
Yeah.
And I know there's like the possibility, I've seen some reports that this game we are going to see Robert Williams on the floor. So like they're expecting Robert Williams to actually play in this game. In what capacity? He hasn't played in a full year after like a serious injury. And they drafted Clint Gain in the lottery. So what does that mean for Ayton? Do we see 32 minutes go to 28? Because obviously that's different. I like the minutes that Ayton's playing because it's allowing the double doubles and the shot attempts to get there. So I like Ayton as long as we're guaranteed he's going to play 30 plus minutes. But yeah, I think anyone Ayton up is Gobert up really is playable.
Those not spending up are going to Brook Lopez tonight. Again, you talk Ayton being rather safe. Now, there was no Giannis in that last game, 36 minutes. He gave you 32 fantasy points. He's been good, at times over his career. We know the rebounding for a 7-footer has never been great for whatever reason since he left Brooklyn. But the blocks are still really good. He had 4 steals against Cleveland. So we're seeing around like 25% get to Brook Lopez here tonight. And then the first value play that kind of popped this morning, we were kind of looking at each other and wondering, is this what we're doing? Is Jalen Smith, a guy that we have talked a lot about over the course of the season as just sort of that, you know what he can be and you know what he can't be, right? In 16 minutes against Dallas, he gave you 9 fantasy points. The game before that in 15 minutes, he gave you 18. He has a 29 fantasy point game in 12 minutes. So, people are willing to take the dart on him tonight. As of now, we're looking at him. He's about 15% rostership. So again, not like your core play, but when looking for value tonight, there's only a handful of under 4K guys that are even in rotations. And Jalen Smith is one of those guys.
I think there's a few things here. One, treat Jalen Smith probable tags as questionable. Never treat him as probable.
True.
No player has been ruled out after lock more than Jalen Smith over the last couple of years without like any information until like he doesn't check in, right? Until like the second quarter, like, oh yeah, I forgot Jalen Smith not playing. Two, if like you're making a decision on a value play from Chicago,
Yeah.
and it's between Smith and Dalen Terry, I'll take my chances with Jalen Smith before I take my chance with Dalen Terry. Not like Jalen Smith obviously has worse eligibility, but at least he scores a lot of fantasy points in a very short window. He was really popular before. That's fallen off the table now. That obviously leads to it being more appealing, just given what he can do in a short window. So yeah, I mean, I think Jalen Smith is very interesting. You're not getting him in garbage time. He doesn't really play in garbage time.
Nope.
The only way he is going to get extended is if there's foul trouble, which Vooch has not really dealt with in any capacity this year.
Oh, he's a good player.
Yeah, so you're basically just locked into whatever Vooch is not playing in a competitive game, right? So if Vooch gets you 36, Jalen Smith's playing 12 minutes, and you got to hope that he goes nuclear in those 12 minutes. But it's possible. So yeah, I think in tournaments, Jalen Smith is the better bull value than Dalen Terry, just simply from a fantasy point per minute aspect. The only name I'd want to circle back to is Walker Kessler. And I understand that if Giannis is in, this is obviously like inherent risk. But we talk about this all the time, right? His last two matchups were against the Nicolas in Vucevic and Jokic. He did not have a problem with either of those two. One of them is the best player on the planet. The other one is a 20-10 guy for the last like 5 years of his career. Walker Kessler, the blocks, he has officially earned the blocker Kessler name.
Yeah.
The rebounds have been a revelation. And anytime you've gotten double-digit actual points this year from Kessler, you've basically gotten 40 fantasy points.
Yeah.
So at 6,100, if you think this is a spot in the best game environment on the board, at least for like both teams, both top 10 in pace, both bottom 10 in defense. If you think Walker Kessler can score and is going to get you to that 30-minute mark, which he's basically done in all but one game this year, and they lost by 40 in that one, then I think Walker Kessler's super sneaky, just given what we've seen. When he scores, he has a massive ceiling. And I think the difference is he was taking threes last year, if you remember. Yeah. He's just around the rim at all times right now. It is, I'm going to block shots, I'm going to rebound, and I'm going to roll to the rim, and I'm going to dominate there. And I think that's the best Walker Kessler we've seen so far. So in tournaments, I know they're healthier, but they were healthier for the first game of the year when he went for 50. Like, I'm not necessarily like worried about Markkanen and Clarkson being back, because I'm not suddenly thinking, oh man, there goes all the shot attempts for Walker Kessler. Like, that's just not what the case is.
I will say, a little bit onto your Denver matchup, that if you go look at the rotations there, he basically played the entire fourth quarter against the backups of Denver. And in the final 9:52 of that game, he had 13 points, 10 rebounds, 3 blocks against
all you need, John. That's all you need.
Against poor DeAndre Jordan. They threw him out there to the Wolves. Hunter Tyson.
Put some respect on Hunter Tyson's name, okay?
Yeah. So Kessler had himself quite a fourth quarter in that one. But to your point, he played regular minutes against regular starting rotation players against Chicago, and went 12-16. And we know the blocks are legit. So again, I don't mind in a fair and balanced line. I'm getting to Walker Kessler. That works. And again, most people seemingly are plugging in the Wemby and Giannis into their center position this evening. All right. That is it for the show. We build our lineup now. For those of you who are new, where do we want to kick things off here?
Dalen Terry.
We're just going right to it.
No, I'm just kidding. No, absolutely not.
You said you didn't want to play him. I was like, all right.
No.
Jackson, I thought.
No. Yeah, Andre Jackson's fine.
Yeah, that's where I thought we were going. All right. Which we going Giannis, you said?
Yeah.
At center or power forward?
Power forward's kind of after Giannis, so I would just say power forward. I think there's probably some decent centers we can go.
Okay. Go Io?
Yep.
6K small forward. Are we going to try double spending? Like, do we want a Dame or?
I think we use Jackson at the small forward. I think small forward is the weakest position on the board, and I think there's a lot of good point guards we can go with. So I'd prefer Jackson at small forward.
All right, next play.
Point guard. I mean, this is we had some talk about Chris Paul earlier. We like Keontae George in tournaments. He's been super safe. Obviously, we're playing Dame if there's no Giannis. I think the Bulls.
I'm good with going Chris Paul here. Okay. Are we going with just one spend up and more of a fair and balanced lineup build then?
Probably.
I mean, obviously at this point, I mean, if we tried to get in an Edwards, be $4,600. I mean, we can definitely build.
That's like a Jalen Smith. That's like basically either playing Walker Kessler or Jalen Smith. Those are like the only two options we really have, I think, at the price. Unless we pivoted Giannis to center and then used.
I mean, there's Jalen McDaniels here, which we know we didn't really talk much about, but the minutes have been there. We know we can give you some defensive stats on a smaller slate. There's a chance for him to come through with 20 fantasy points. We're not going to play AJ Green. I saw the comment about AJ Green. I think he benefited immensely just from
making shots.
Yeah, making shots. And I don't know if they're going to give him an early run because of that, but not someone I'm going to trust to go out there and knock down 7 threes again.
I think he's definitely in their rotation, just given how bad they've been. But like
he DNP'd before that, so
yeah, he also didn't hit 7 of 9 from 3 in any other game. So like giving you're 1-6, giving him a chance to like play. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm not playing him. I'm just saying I do think he's in their rotation.
Sure, we did like Castle at forward. And again, that's assuming we double spend out with Edwards. We could just as easily not go fair and balanced, go Keontae George at center. We could go with Kessler, like you said, or I don't know, Randall 82, Nas Reed at 56. Would you have a preference of that group?
I mean, I think Nas, because I like the matchup so much for Minnesota.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And that would give us $6,800 to kind of close out the position if we wanted to, or kind of move the way around we build our lineup here. I could plug in
Castle there.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have to have Castle, obviously.
Yeah, I'm just looking through what we're doing here. I was listening to my kids scream for a second, so I missed it.
I mean, if we did Jalen Smith, we could obviously get a $7,600 forward, which would be, I guess, Grant.
You could realistically, it's 7,600 any position, because like you could put Smith at center, move Nas Reed to forward.
Yeah. Simons, Giddey, White, any of the.
I mean, I think people are not going to play Chicago tonight because they were letdowns last night, and that's just kind of how recency bias goes, right? Mm-hmm. Where people, Kobe White other than Ayo because he's cheap. Kobe White is 17% rostered. He nuked the slate 2 slates ago without Levine, right? Mm-hmm. Vooch is 9% rostered tonight. Josh Giddey is getting the most ownership tonight at 25%, so people are getting to Giddey.
Sure.
But like, if you think that Chicago is going to stay competitive, I mean, that game has 226 implied points, right? I mean, it's like clearly the second best on the board. So, I think Kobe White's an interesting tournament play.
Power, appreciate you. Not only are we doing NFL tonight, I'll be on the NFL live stream 7-8 o'clock tonight. So hit the subscribe button here and come back with me in an hour. We'll talk about the NFL DFS slate. So we got that going there. Paul, DeSumo, Jackson, Giannis, Smith, George, Reed, and White. $300 left over. If you're building a more fair and balanced lineup, you can obviously move some guys around to get up to Wemby, Giannis, and Ant Giannis, a Lillard, however you want to go about and build some lineups. Just an example here for everybody. So we appreciate you tuning in. We'll have the full show preview show tonight and a live stream again tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern time. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that share. We got the 7-day free trial going on right now. So scan that QR code or go to fantasyalarm.com/win. Good luck with your 3 gamer roster lock at 8 o'clock, everybody. So couple